What is your relationship to the defendant, Richard Merritt?
I'm his ex-wife.
And how long were you married?
19 years.
And when you were married to the defendant, what kind of work did he do?
He was an attorney, but not when we first got married.
When did he become an attorney?
He became an attorney quite some time after he graduated. It took him 3 times to pass the bar.
Okay. And did he work for a firm?
He worked for many firms.
All right. Did he, what kind of law did he practice?
He practiced many different kinds of law over the years. He had a lot of different jobs at a lot of different firms doing.
Did you notice the tone of her voice when she said he worked for many firms?
Different things.
Prior to losing his license, what was he doing?
He had his own private practice prior to losing his license.
Okay. And how was that funded?
When he started his practice, how was it funded? His mother gave him all of the money that he needed to start his law practice.
And what were the reasons that you divorced the defendant?
I divorced my ex-husband when I found out about his double life and his crimes and what he had done to all those people and what he had done to us.
And specifically, what was that?
What did he do to us?
Yes.
Let's see. He didn't pay our mortgage for 6 months, so we lost our home. At the time of his arrest, January of 2018, we lost our electricity because he hadn't paid the bill. I had a van that I used to transport my daughter and her wheelchair, and he pawned the van, so I lost my car.
Interesting. He stole a lot of money. So where did it go if he's not paying his bills?
When did you ask the defendant for a divorce?
I served him divorce papers 5 days after he was arrested.
And when was that?
He was arrested January 31st of 2018. So 5 days later, I asked for divorce.
All right. And when was the arrest, or the divorce final?
It was about June 20th of that year. So it was four months later.
Okay. And you said that the defendant had been arrested in what jurisdiction was he arrested?
Cobb County.
Did you post his bond?
No. No.
Okay. Who posted his bond?
His mother.
Do you know the amount of the bond?
I don't remember. I know it was a lot, and I know she put up her house.
His mother gave him all the money to start a law practice, and he stole from clients. His mother paid his bond, and it was enough that she needed to put up her house. So if he's going there on the day he's supposed to turn himself in, he may have decided already that he wasn't going to turn himself in, that he was going to leave. And he may have thought, because his mother has done everything to support him all along, he may have thought she would keep quiet about it, at least, or give him some money or give him her car. Maybe this all went sideways when she said no to him. It sounds like he'd never been told no.
Were there any special meals that she would cook for the defendant?
Yes. One of the favorite things that she made was her spaghetti and the sauce recipe, and I actually use that recipe myself to this day.
That spaghetti is what was in her kitchen, what she was preparing on the day she was murdered.
What was the relationship between the defendant and his mother like?
Contentious. They argued a lot. She did a lot to help us, yet he wasn't always nice to her. He would get frustrated with her because he thought she was too involved in our lives a lot of the time.
What do you mean she would do a lot to help you?
She did so much to help us. She helped us buy a house when we were young. When we were first married, before Richard was an attorney, she helped us out financially because I was a student and we needed help paying our bills. And of course, like I said, she gave him the money he needed to start his firm.
And when the defendant was arrested, did he hire a defense attorney?
He did.
Okay. Do you know who paid for that?
Shirley paid for it.
Okay. Did you or the defendant owe Shirley any money at the time of her death?
I know he had borrowed money from her that he intended to pay back, but the understanding was he was never going to pay her back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear? You said that there was some contentiousness between the two of them. What, in general, were their arguments about?
Everything.
Okay.
Everything.
What was Shirley's reaction after learning that the defendant had committed these crimes against his clients?
She was devastated. Okay. She was devastated that her son had been capable of hurting all those people. It ruined her life.
But this witness wasn't present for any of that alleged discussion that took place that morning. So what personal knowledge would she have of what his state of mind was that day?
Well, we believe it was ongoing.
And this witness has personal knowledge of that because why?
Well, she would just say that he didn't show any remorse.
To her? And I don't see how that's relevant to whether or not he committed this offense.
Okay.
I don't think this witness is competent to testify.
Okay.
So this judge is going to make sure that things are fair. That's good. We want everybody to have a fair trial.
I talked to him frequently during that time because he wanted to get some affairs in order and see the children and say goodbye to the children.
And did he have the opportunity to say goodbye to the children?
He did.
When was that?
That was the Thursday night before, that was the night before the murder, Thursday night of that week.
And did you have a key to Shirley Merritt's house?
I did.
Okay. I want to discuss the events of February 1st, 2019. Did you see the defendant that day?
I did.
Where did you see him?
I saw him at my daughter's appointment. She had an appointment with her neurologist early that morning, and he met us there at the appointment, which was unusual.
And why? Well, first of all, why was that unusual?
Because for most of Mia's life, I went to all of her doctor appointments without him.
And was it planned that you would meet him at the doctor's appointment that day?
Yes, he said he was coming and he was going to meet me there.
How did he act during that appointment?
His demeanor was very strange.
How so?
He didn't speak. He didn't look at anyone. He didn't talk to me or the doctor. He had an aura of, it's hard to describe. He was either very angry or...
And I'm not going to ask you to speculate as to how he was feeling. I'm just...
Yeah, she can't say how he was feeling. She doesn't know unless he tells her. She says he was acting unusual. Well, whether he's planning to escape or whether he's planning on doing what he's supposed to do and turning himself in to serve a 15-year sentence. It is an unusual and stressful day. So for somebody to act unusual is not actually weird. It would be weird if he acted normal.
Did you all leave the appointment at the same time?
We did not.
Okay. What happened?
The doctor offered.
Okay, without saying what was said.
Right. We did not leave the appointment at the same time. I believe he left before me, and the doctor escorted me out to my car.
Why would the doctor escort her to the car? The doctor must have thought something was up. The doctor must have thought that there was some worry. I mean, that's weird, right? There's something more here that, for whatever reason, she can't say.
Did you learn that the defendant did not turn himself into the jail as ordered?
I did.
When did you learn that?
I learned that at 5:30. David Willingham, his lawyer, called me to see if I had heard from him because he did not report.
Okay. And what did you do at that point?
Gathered together with my family and went as fast as we could to pick up my son where he was at the band concert.
Why did you do that?
Because we were worried about Richard being missing and Jack being away from us.
Okay. What were you worried about?
We were worried about what Rich might do.
Okay. Do you recall when you learned that he was arrested?
Yes.
When was that?
That was 3 o'clock on the date of his arrest. The marshals called me to tell me.
What was your reaction?
I know I started screaming relief, extreme relief that he had been caught. Finally.
Why were you relieved?
Because we were so scared during the whole time that he was gone that he might come after us or hurt us.
Okay.
Because his behavior had been so scary at the time that we last saw him.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Okay. And back in January 2019 and 2018, this fraud case up in Cobb County, it was a big deal, correct?
Right.
And it was a big deal because especially not only was it that it involved 34 counts, tens of victims, but it was in the county which you and Richard lived at the time, correct?
Correct.
And because I believe at the time you and Richard were living in Smyrna.
Right.
Okay. And it was a big deal because also it involved elderly people, correct?
Right.
And it involved the loss of hundreds of thousands of dollars, correct?
Right.
And at this time, tensions were kind of high up there in the area where you and Richard were living, correct?
Correct.
And I think some people even called it sort of like a lynch mob after your husband, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And leading up to him entering the plea, even though you and Richard weren't together, you were concerned and a bit nervous about the whole situation.
I wasn't nervous about the situation. I was mortified that the whole world knew what I had been through. I wasn't scared. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking me.
But you were concerned, correct? You were concerned about the world and what they were thinking.
Yes.
And then you were maybe a little concerned that maybe somebody was, or some person or someone was following you?
No, never.
And didn't someone come up to your job at some point in time regarding the case?
Nobody came up to my job. When Richard was first arrested, one of the victims called and told my boss what he had done. I was never worried about being followed or anything like that.
It didn't bother you that people were calling your job to talk about your husband?
It bothered me because I was.
He's trying to characterize things as a certain way, that she feels scared, and she says she does not. And he's trying to make it sound like, well, somebody came to your work, and she says, no, that's not it. And instead of accepting the answer and moving on, he says, so it didn't bother you what people think. Well, wait a minute. That's not what she responded to. That's not what she said at all. So I think a lot of witnesses would get confused and actually try to answer that. And she's, I think, doing pretty well here.
So that's why it bothered me. I was never scared. I was mortified.
Okay. And then, of course, I know on one occasion, you released someone concerned because you did get a flyer, a cartoon in your mailbox, correct?
I remember the cartoons in my mailbox.
Okay. And did you discuss those with Richard?
Yes.
Did you discuss those with Shirley?
Yes.
Okay. And to your knowledge, did Shirley get the same flyer?
Objection, Your Honor. Again, this is a listening hearsay.
It's a yes or no. I'm not asking what Shirley may have said.
Okay.
And to your knowledge, did Shirley get that same flyer?
Yes, the flyers were put in her mailbox as well.
Okay. And is that a true and accurate copy of the flyer that you received in your mailbox? And you understand Ms. Mayer also received?
Well, I did not see the ones that Shirley received.
Fair enough. Is that the one
This is the one that was in my mailbox.
And the one you discussed with Shirley?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time we move to introduce offensive number 1.
Any objection?
Can I look at it for one moment, please?
And this is the flyer, a copy of the flyer which you received in your mailbox.
This was right before the day he was sentenced.
Tune in January 18, 2019 for another edition of Georgia Cobb County Justice titled Will Flournoy Fix Again. Who's Flournoy? Never had any Flournoy.
That was the judge.
And then this mention here of Judge, you never know, I'm a repeat offender, and I violated my bond twice. I'm a bad, bad boy. I know you'll go easy on me. And that was some of the language on the flyer.
That's what I'm.
All right. This is prior to him being sentenced. And so far, it looks like people are, or somebody is concerned that he's going to get away with it. But we know he doesn't. We know he enters a guilty plea, he's convicted, and is given a serious sentence. Any anger or concern that somebody might have about him not facing justice prior to his conviction would have been mitigated or ameliorated when he was indeed sentenced. So I think it's a stretch to make this relevant.
Reading on the flyer.
Then, of course, we have a comment here. Ask DA Margaret, hey, who cares about the elderly? We take care of our own. How do I look with a hairpiece? I'm such a tool. I guess that's some of the commentary from somebody on this flyer that you see.
Yes.
And there appears to be some comment here about DA Reynolds and also about the judge in the case.
That's what I'm reading.
Yes. And that's what you received. Now, did that cause you, again, did it cause you any concern?
I was not happy about it
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want the victims to confront me because I felt so bad that they thought I was an accomplice. I was upset that they knew where I lived because I was afraid they were going to try to talk to me and not accept my apologies for him. I was never afraid of them. I just thought, oh, they know.
I think it's important to note that even if she didn't feel fear, it doesn't mean that there wasn't something to be afraid of. However, looking at what we just saw, I don't see anything threatening or that would cause too much concern in that flyer. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a former threat assessment specialist. I'm not seeing it. If it was every week, if it had continued afterwards, if it escalated, that would be different. But what the cartoon is trying to convey is, you know what? We think you're going to take care of your own because he's a lawyer and you're all lawyers and judges and you're all in bed together. And that's what the author or authors of the cartoon obviously believed. But subsequent to the cartoon, he was convicted and given a substantial sentence. I'm waiting to hear if there's, cartoons and threats and everything else that continued to happen.
I was not afraid.
Now, excuse me, didn't mean to interrupt. But that day, isn't it true that you took your son out of school that day?
I don't remember. If I did take him out of school that day, it was probably because everyone at his school was talking to him about it and he was emotionally traumatized.
But then you mentioned that there were times, I believe your word was, they could be contentious.
Yes.
Now, is it fair to say Shirley, she was a kind and gracious lady, but she was also a strong lady?
She was a firecracker.
Good way of putting it. And she was strong-willed.
Yes.
And your husband, he was kind of strong-willed also.
Kinda.
And the two of them, right, you said they could butt heads.
Yes, they butted heads a lot.
About simple stuff.
About a lot of things. Oh, so many things.
Okay. However, though they would argue, there never was any fights or any physical violence between either one of them, was there?
There was never anything physical, no.
Okay. And regardless of your feelings about Richard, he did not have a reputation for being a violent man, did he?
No, but he had a very, very scary temper. Okay. Somewhere towards the end of our marriage, the last couple of years, I do recall, but we had an argument and we were in our bedroom and he pushed me to the ground and I hit my head on the bed.
And actually the two of you pushed each other?
No, he pushed me and I hit my head. He pushed me down. I didn't do anything.
And did you call police?
No.
Did you make a report?
No, because I was scared of what he would do if I reported it.
Did you file for divorce?
Not at that time.
Because you told us days after he gets arrested for fraud, within 5 days, you filed for divorce, correct?
Because of what he did to me and to all those people.
I know what he's trying to do. This is just ridiculously unfair. And this is an example of why victims don't report and they don't come forward. This woman's been with him for years and years and years. They've built a life together. They have a house, they have kids. Most of the time things are okay. And this incident happens. And it would be scary and it would be emotionally painful as well as physically. It's really unusual, actually, for victims to report the very first assault to police. So we're hearing he has a pattern where he has a temper that is actually frightening. He is somebody who has power. Everything she has is wrapped up in this guy. So they're in a fight, an argument, and he pushes her just because she didn't call the police or go get a divorce. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean it wasn't scary. Doesn't mean it wasn't painful. Doesn't mean that the situation is not dangerous. And nobody has a right to judge or to try and make that mean something different than what it does. There are a few differences between that situation and her discovering what he'd done to all those people. One difference is by the time you get to all the fraud and that revelation, that physical incident had already happened, right? So she knows that. She knows he's got that temper. She knows that he's capable of getting physical. And now she discovers a double life. And that's beyond, I got mad during a fight and I did a bad thing one time. And I'm not saying it's okay to do the bad thing the one time, but it is different from a course of conduct, a pattern of behavior, and a long-term deception that went on. He proves himself to be not at all what anybody thinks. On the outside, he's this successful lawyer, prominent family. He seems very charming just based on what we've heard. He's got a wife and kids and all that, American dream. But underneath it all, he's been defrauding vulnerable people. He's taking advantage of his mother, in my opinion, and he's been defrauding people. And that requires a whole heck of a lot of deception, and it requires that he live a double life. And so he's betrayed his own family and his friends and frankly, his profession. So, of course, you would immediately want to divorce somebody. If you believe that he's done this, that he's lived this double life all along, that's different than a blow up on a Sunday afternoon. And I'm not saying the blow up on the Sunday afternoon is okay or that nothing should have been done. There should have been something done. But you know what? It's her choice. And it bugs me that this lawyer, I know he has to do his job and defend his client, but the characterization and the insinuation here is troubling. All right, I'll stop ranting.
We went out to dinner. We did things as a family before the very end when his behavior changed, when he started drinking very heavily and showing us the temper that was very scary.
Now, and you mentioned that, and I haven't seen a single report where you mentioned that that was an issue in your relationship, correct?
I didn't talk about it because it was very scary. It happened probably in the couple of months before he was arrested, and he told me later he knew he was about to be arrested because he knew he was going to get caught, and that was when he started coming home very, very drunk and angry. His temper scared us very badly. There was one night where Jack and I were looking for somewhere to run and hide, but Mia was upstairs sleeping and we couldn't wake her up and we didn't want to leave her.
Now, that is
We're getting some insight here into how he behaves when he's under a lot of pressure, when he thinks he's going to get caught. Right? So he's under a lot of pressure and he can't keep the mask on anymore. His temper is so frightening that his family is afraid. His family is thinking about trying to find some place to run and hide. And this is when the pressure is building up at the time he thinks he's going to get caught. So what happens on the day that he is supposed to report to serve 15 years in jail? On that day, do you think maybe he had some pressure? Do you think maybe he was concerned about the next 15 years of his life, about losing all that? Do you think it's possible that he decided he wasn't going to lose all that? He wasn't going to let that happen? And his mother wasn't prepared to acquiesce, to cooperate. If the one person who has always stood by him, argument or not, says no, and we know how he responds under the stress of being caught, and this is the day he's going to report to jail for 15 years, it is not out of character for him to have done this. Now, that doesn't mean that he did it, but it's certainly not inconsistent.
Well, he became a lawyer after failing the bar 2 times.
3 times.
Right. Is that something you used to mention about your husband before all this?
No, I didn't, but I mentioned it because Miss Pott asked me what Shirley had done to help us and when she had given us money. And so I said that there was a while that it took him to pass the bar where we needed financial help, and Shirley was the one to help us. That is the only reason I said it took him a while.
He's trying to paint her as the nasty lion ex-wife. And he's twisting things and insinuating things. I mean, I think he's close to the edge there.
Conclusion of that appointment, the doctor said, Janine, let me walk you to your car, because he didn't like the way Richard's aura was and his behavior. So me as doctor walked me to my car out through the employee entrance and stood with me until we safely got in the car and drove away. Richard did not walk me to my car. The doctor did not allow it.
And you say Richard wasn't even there at that point in time?
He went to wherever he had parked and left.
Okay.
I went alone with the doctor who insisted on escorting me to my car.
And of course, at that time, you didn't call police, correct?
No.
You didn't make any type of report of him acting strange or...
If she called the police, what are they going to do? He's acting weird. He's going to jail for 15 years later that day. The police can't do anything about that. And you know what? If she had called the police, as she sits here now, the lawyer would take that and paint it and say, you called the police when he didn't even do anything wrong. You're out to get him. There's nothing she can do that is going to be okay, that isn't going to be spun or twisted. The other thing I want to mention here is she talks about an aura. I don't know why I dislike that word. Maybe it's because it's so out in the air. So she talks about this aura, and she's unable to put it in specific or precise words, and she can't say to the court what was in his head, right? I mean, she felt it, she noticed it, and it was something that the doctor noticed. The doctor noticed enough, sensed enough, that it was serious enough, that the doctor insisted on walking her out through an employee entrance. Something was up there. He'd already said goodbye to the kids. He wasn't all that involved in the daughter's life. So why would he go to a routine appointment? And he's giving off signals, and it's probably body language, right? That they're picking up on. That even causes the doctor concern. Something was going on there at that point, somewhere in there, around the time of this appointment. That was when he made his decision, if it wasn't already made. And I can't help but wonder if he was looking and considering doing other things. The defense hasn't presented everything on their side yet, and we haven't seen crime scene evidence, and he's not convicted. So, I mean, he's innocent until proven otherwise, but man, this isn't looking good.
But at some point in time, as you said, you facilitated Richard being able to see the kids weekly, bi-weekly on a regular basis, correct?
I allowed that, absolutely.
Because at that time, you didn't have concerns about Mia's or Jack's well-being, correct?
At that time, I didn't know he was capable of murder, but at the time of his arrest in January 18, I didn't know he was capable of hurting elderly people. There was a lot I didn't know about him.
Well, now you say all that, because obviously, as you've already told us, you hate Richard, but you don't know what happened, correct?
She's made a heck of a statement, a heck of a comeback for the jury to hear. And he can object whether he's guilty of murder or not. One of the things that all of this is showing us, that she's telling us, is this guy that I lived with, that I was married to for 19 years, was actually somebody else. I lived with this man for 19 years. We had children together. And he was able to hide all this from me. So if you hear somebody later saying, oh, but this killing is out of character for him, or bad things are out of character for him, well, just because somebody thinks they know somebody, it doesn't mean they do.
And you said that was when he was drinking. Did he always drink?
He always drank, and he always drank a lot. We used to drink together during the days when we partied. I myself am in recovery, and I've been sober for a long time. Towards the end, and by the end I mean the time where he admitted he knew he was about to be arrested, he was driving home so drunk that he couldn't get out of his car once he got into the garage. We would find him lying on the floor out.
Drunk driving and driving, this is not drunk driving where you had a glass of wine and you've miscalculated your BAC, right? This is driving very drunk. Shows an absolute disregard for the society he lives in. It shows an absolute disregard for the lives and welfare of other people. And being a personal injury lawyer, of all people, he should know better. He should know what that costs to victims. And victims who aren't killed still are injured and have their lives completely altered. And they suffer. And yet he's willing to drive drunk. So we're seeing more about his character as we go through. He's not a nice guy. Whether he killed his mother or not, this is not a good guy.
You just characterized it. Richard he treated her as if he was ungrateful, correct?
Yes.
But I guess at the same time, likewise, I guess, didn't you treat her as if you were ungrateful also?
Didn't I treat her as if I were ungrateful of her help?
Because you benefited from all this help, correct?
Why is he skewering her when, I mean, it's not going to prove anything. Even if she was ungrateful, even if she was a nasty you-know-what, she is not accused of killing the woman. If the accused was ungrateful and the witness is also ungrateful, her lack of gratitude, if it exists, doesn't impeach her, doesn't add anything.
May the witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Queen.
Yes, Your Honor.